Good morning. How is everybody? And thank you very much. I have to say, listening to the last set of presentations, we definitely need some of that virtual reality for our medical students. They've been out of the clinicals and out of the hospital since March when we pulled them, and we're still questioning whether they're going to get back in for this fall term and stuff. So thank you. I really enjoyed that. Um, I'm here to talk a little bit more about academic integrity and trying a prediction model. Obviously, what we were interested in doing here is we were looking at medical students and looking at the difference between something that, while there are lots of studies about integrity and academic integrity and cheating, our goal was to try to differentiate passive versus active cheating and predictive models. We all know as educators that academic integrity can be a real challenge. And right now, with all of our students doing everything online, it definitely poses a challenge. I know we have problems unless they are literally monitored with cameras coming back. The software, they're probably more capable than at least than I am, at figuring out how to beat the system online. And unfortunately, students who cheat don't develop the skills or knowledge that we need, especially within medical school. So this was our goal. Our goal was to kind of do this from a medical perspective. The same way we do an odds ratio to determine the risk of, let's say, diabetes related to certain behavioral factors, or hypertension, or cancer. We wanted to try to see if we could actually measure the risk for cheating in medical students. So what we did is we took individual variables, which were the traditional variables typically done by Cottrell and the Big Five, which talks about emotional stability, agreeableness, conscientiousness, extroversion, introversion, and openness related to cheating. Like I said, this has kind of been the classic component of measures used when we look at individual variables. So we wanted these individual variables, again, incorporated, but then we wanted to put it into two contexts, one being passive and active cheating, and the other being cultural context. As it was mentioned, I am teaching and working and been living in the Middle East for about the last decade. And cultural values definitely are different. And when we look at collective societies, such as Jordan, we're really looking at societies where if they're asked to help, they're going to help. It is frowned upon not to assist and not to help. A lot of studies we found and have reported that typically they think there's a difference culturally between those who cheat from Asian and European cultures, or the Western US cultures, and Middle East. You can see a recent study in here that I just put in very quickly to mention, was the fact that in the UAE, about 71% of their students admitted to cheating openly and didn't think it was a problem. If we look at another study that came out of Croatia, and this was specific to medical students, which really scared me, 99% of their medical students in one class reported that they walked in ready to cheat. And you're going, and you want to take care of me? And you're going to prescribe medication and take care of my mother or my family? So it gets us concerned, especially with ethics in medicine. What's interesting is even when we go to the UK, we found that more than about a third of medical students have witnessed cheating. And about 2/3 have said, oh yeah, I heard so-and-so cheated, or so-and-so did this. So even though we have these standards of ethics that we think apply within the medical framework that would be different maybe than business or some other areas, we still find ourselves faced with the same challenge. Now, the difference between active cheating and passive cheating, and that's really, like I said, where our study becomes different. Active cheating is copying somebody, asking for answers, giving them answers, writing a paper for somebody. But the passive cheating is more what we're seeing actively now, which is they're aware that so-and-so has a phone with answers and they don't do anything about it. A student comes in, and I don't know about your universities, but I know we require mandatory attendance. So they will what? Log in or sign in for somebody else. We've gone to a fingerprint system, and they will still try to figure out how to beat the fingerprint system uh, for just attending class. Um, so I find it very interesting. And so what we did, so when we talk about passive cheating, we're talking about the awareness and letting it go. Now, we had 353 medical students. All were Arab of origin. About 85% are Jordanian, and the other 15% of our medical students typically come from the Gulf region of Kuwait, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. When we look at the distribution, we are following pretty much trends of international distributions. Slightly more females than males now are enrolled in the medical programs. And what we found, and so what we did first was we actually took our instrumentation and with Lizarel did a confirmatory factor analysis, obviously to see if our personality factors and our cultural variables and academic integrity culture were actually reliable. And so we went through this and we found we got basically norm chi-squares that were both good for both the active cheating and the passive cheating. In this slide, I only am showing you the active cheating. The passive I still have, and it's also in the article if you're wanting to see all the tables and everything else. But what we found is that the composite reliability was fairly decent. Each of the 6 scales was greater than 0.7, so we met our minimum criteria of cutoffs. So once we determined that the instrument was pretty much measuring, we then went in and did the odds ratios or the logistic regression for active and passive cheating based on the various components here. Obviously, we looked at gender, we looked at the academic integrity culture of the university, and then we did all 5 of the individual factors. What's interesting is I only have 3 here because only 3 actually play in either relationship. The other 2 fell apart and don't actually say anything about cheating, active or passive. And if you look over here, I think what you'll see is when we looked at passive cheating, what was really interesting is our odds ratio is 1.7825, and obviously it was statistically significant. This was interesting. Students that had higher levels of emotional stability are more likely to allow passive cheating to go on. Okay, so in other words, if we have a student that actually really is comfortable and confident with where they are, they don't really care what anybody else is doing. So they're going to let that bypass. Now, with active cheating, we saw something very different. We actually saw that males cheated more than females and stuff in our gender component. The other thing is we actually, instead of what increased the likelihood of active cheating, we actually found that 2 variables, both individual personality variables, being agreeableness and conscientiousness, were actually protective factors. The same way when we talk about eating 5 fruits and vegetables a day, we're talking about that same kind of component. So our summary was that being male increased the likelihood of active cheating, and you can see our odds ratio with our confidence interval, and agreeableness and conscientiousness were both protective factors. And they're huge protective factors when we look at this. They reduced active cheating by 55 and 43% respectively. Cultural factors, which again was part of our interest because the studies have been showing that Middle Eastern culture more likely to allow, especially the passive cheating, thinking that that would be normalized here, actually had no impact on medical students and their cheating capacities. But like I said, emotional stability did increase the likelihood of passive cheating. So our results is basically that what we found was that academic integrity culture did not have an impact on either active or passive cheating. So the university culture, when we all talk about having role models and ethics and academic boards of integrity, they are not as influential on the student patterns as we'd like to think they would have. The collective cultures is not a risk factor in either active or passive cheating. And like I said, the 2 personality characteristics actually are protective factors. And when it comes to gender, active cheaters are more likely to be male, sorry guys, But when it comes to passive cheating, there was no difference between males and females. It's all equal. So I really appreciate you letting me share our findings about this with the group today, and thank you.